Linuxfest. It's been a couple of years since I talked about FreeNAS. When I was putting together this talk, I was looking through my old FreeNAS talks, and it looks like it's been the 9-3 days since I gave a presentation. So today I'm going to talk about what's in the new 11 and what's coming in 11.1, which is due out next month. And I'll start with a bit of an overview of FreeNAS, just for those of you that aren't aware of the features that it has. Those of you who have been to my other FreeNAS talks, just bear with me as we go through the features. And then we'll get into the more interesting stuff. So it actually being in the 11 series and what we're looking forward to on 11.1. It's coming out in another month or so. At the very end of this talk, I have a list of URLs as well as the URL to this presentation so that you can download it if you're interested. So we'll just start with a bit of an overview of FreeNAS. What is FreeNAS? It is an open source network attached storage, so it allows you to take your own hardware, you download the operating system, and you're able to provide storage over a network. It is licensed under the 2 clause BSD license, so it's fully open source. If you were to download the latest version today, that would be 11.0. Earlier this year, we changed our naming conventions slightly to make it obvious when there have been updates to our release. So whenever you see the letter U, that basically indicates there were updates. And typically those are for security fixes. So the U4 that we released on Monday was for the latest round of Samba vulnerabilities. That's basically what went into that update. 11.1 is the one we're working madly on now, and it has a lot of really cool features, which I'll be providing an overview today. We're going to have a slight RC process for that because there are a lot of new features, and we want to have a good chance to get most of the bugs shaken out before release. So right now, October 23rd is the date that we have for the first beta or RC. And assuming we don't find any showstoppers, we're aiming for mid-November for 11.1 release. So why would I download and install FreeNAS? What am I going to get out of it if I do so? So there's a lot of features built into it. I probably have about 4 slides with walls of text of the features because it is a very feature-rich project. The biggest feature, and I'll touch a little bit on why it is a big feature, is OpenCFS. As you can see from my t-shirt, I'm a huge fan of OpenCFS. And having used it for the last couple of years, I could not go back to any other file system. And I'll talk a little bit about why OpenCFS is so cool. In my resources at the end, I have more information about OpenCFS, if that's a file system that you're not familiar with, to help you with some of the terminology and some of the features. The reason why we use OpenCFS is it's beautifully designed for storage. It's going to make sure that your disks are healthy and let you know if they're not, and it's going to make sure that your data stays intact. And the data that you actually write is the data that you serve up. So it's designed to be self-healing. We also support all of the major file sharing protocols. So if you have Mac systems or if you want to do time machine backups, we support both AFP and SMB for that. If you have Windows systems, you can easily create Windows shares. And if you have Unix systems and people who like to do things from the command line, we also support NFS. We also provide block protocols, so you can use iSCSI. And the advantage of using a block protocol is it doesn't matter what the underlying file system is. You can use that as if it was its own disk. So I can create an iSCSI share and I can format it with FAT32 if I feel like it. and put Windows stuff on it. So a lot of people like to use that use case. In addition to actually creating shares, you can still get into the system other ways. So you can use FTP or secure FTP. You can SSH into the system. We also provide web dev if you just want to be able to have an easy way to see what your folders are. We do integrate with all of the major Active Directory services. So the open ones like OpenLDAP, NIS, for people still using that, and Active Directory. We allow you to easily take snapshots of your data and to be able to replicate those to other systems, so you can use that as part of your backup strategy. You can do that either through ZFS or through rsync, and you can do it over a secure connection. And ZFS itself is a great way of being able to take point-in-time snapshots of what your data looks like and being able to go and restore data from that point of time. Still got a couple more pages of features here. For those of you in the Unix world, we all know how much fun it is to make a cron tab by hand or to get your users to do that. So we do provide front ends to that. Because we're based on FreeBSD, we also have things called sysctls that allow you to tune kernel variables on a running system. We provide a front end for that. And in FreeBSD, if I want to tell it what drivers to load at given time, typically I'm editing loader.conf, but in FreeNAS I can just do that through a GUI and tell it which drivers to load. We do have nice, pretty graphs to look at to show your CPU usage, your disk usage, memory usage. If your disks are smart aware, you can schedule what tests run and when they do so. We do have an automated alert system that will tell you if a disk is having issues, if a new update's available, if you've lost connection to your Active Directory server, so it will alert you of conditions in both the GUI, and it will also send an email, so you can be aware of it that way. You can connect to UPS. More features. If you want to do networking, we got link aggregation, we got failover, VLAN support, all kinds of features built right into the product. Last thing I'll mention in the features, one of the design goals is you always want your data to be separate from your operating system when you're dealing with storage. That way, if the operating system goes belly up, you haven't lost your data. And we actually provide a hardware distinction between where your OS lives and where your data lives. So typically, as an end user, you're installing FreeNAS on a thumbstick, possibly an SSD, and that's where the OS lives. Our upgrade mechanism, we're able to do this because we use ZFS. It will actually keep a copy of your existing operating system when you do an upgrade, and it will install the upgrade in what's called a boot environment and add this information to your boot menu. So if you're running U3 today and you see there's an update to U4, when you upgrade, both U3 and U4 will show up in your boot menu. So on the off chance that something happened in U4 that messed up your system, you just reboot back to your former good environment. There's a question in the back?
Yeah. Can you run your operating system live or must it be on?
So what do you mean? Oh.
As in the operating system, say, on video like DVD?
Yeah, so we don't provide a live version because we assume you're setting up basically a storage appliance.
I'm only asking the question in terms of separating the operating system from there.
Okay. And we also provide an administrative GUI that you access through a web browser. We do provide a web shell for those that like to use the command line, but most people just SSH in if they're going to play with the command line. So I talked a little bit about boot environments. This is one of the main advantages we get with ZFS. And we already put your operating system on a separate disk. If you wish, you can create a boot mirror for that. So if one of your boot devices goes bad, you can still boot into the system. And in the interface itself, we have a boot manager that shows you all the entries in your boot menu, and they're dated, and then they have names that deal with the operating system. You can go in and get rid of boot environments that you don't need anymore. So if you decide you don't need update 1 anymore, you can remove it from the boot environment. And you don't have to remember to take a boot environment. When you do an update, it already happens for you. And as I said before, you can restore any version of the operating system. Our update manager itself does allow you to track different trains. And by train, I mean different major versions of the operating system. So before we moved on to 11, the version before that was called 9.10, and we still have people that are still on the 9.10 series. When they're ready to upgrade to 11, they just select the 11 train and they're ready to go. And because of the boot environments, they still have their 9.10 system installed until they take that out of their boot menu. Sometimes we'll have people that will report bugs and a fix has been made and they either want to help test it or they need it before the next release. So we also have a train called Nightly where you can go and install the Nightly, test that driver or test that fix and give your feedback, and then you just reboot back into your stable system. So typically we'll have a train for the release before, the release we're on now, and the release that will be coming next. Whatever train you're on, that's what the alert system will tell you what there's updates for. And when an update is available, we also provide links to the change log so you know what updates are in there. There are release notes. And starting with the next version, we're also going to start adding errata of known issues for that release. But this gives you a lot of flexibility, so you're aware when there are new updates, but you can decide what works for your environment when to actually apply the updates. And you know you always have a way back should there be a problem with the update. So that's just sort of a quick overview for those of you who aren't familiar with FreeNAS. So let's get into the more interesting stuff. So we're now on the 11 train, and just to give you an idea of what's in 11, so the version before that was called 9.10, which was sort of a confusing name because our versions traditionally gave you an idea of what the underlying FreeBSD operating system was. The train was called 9, but the 10 indicated that you were on FreeBSD 10. So with 11, we said, let's just go back to the proper naming mechanisms so you know you're now on FreeBSD 11. And what we say is we're on FreeBSD 11 stable. So stable means it's all of the latest fixes for that release that have happened since the release of FreeBSD 11, which was some time ago, several months ago. So you're always getting the latest drivers that have been tested as stable for 11. And the difference from 10 to 11, there were some very significant changes in FreeBSD, which resulted in updated drivers. And from a NAS point of view, very good drivers, performance boost for network speeds and that. So those of you that are still at 9.10, especially if you're in a production environment, we recommend that you upgrade to 11 just for those drivers. We also got some new OpenZFS features. So OpenZFS uses something called feature flags to let you know what features are in. And if you're interested, the name of the two new features are there, and you can Google those to see what they do for you. Also, a lot of the sharing capabilities are third-party software, and they've also been updated to the latest. So you have the latest Samba NFS. The GUI is based on Python, so you have the latest Python as well. And that includes all of the security fixes for those applications. The one thing that people have been waiting for forever, and there's been promises, is to actually get a new UI. And so I'll talk a little bit about the UI. So in 11, we are staging out how the UI is changing. And part of the UI rework, rather than just making it look pretty and providing different themes, which we have, the underlying technology is the APIs, because we do provide a full API plus a middleware. And the old version of FreeNAS, anybody who's used it before knows you can only open one task at a time. You have to wait for it to finish, and then you can do something else. And this can be rather inconvenient, say if you're installing a large plugin, and you basically have to sit there for 10 minutes and wait for it to do its thing. So the new middleware is completely asynchronous, so you can do multiple things at a time, but it takes time to change from a synchronous to an asynchronous middleware. As we are replacing the middleware calls, we're also replacing the UI calls, and we've changed from a Python environment to an Angular environment. So I'll show you a couple of pictures and to show you the work is, but if you go in now on a FreeNAS 11 system, when you go to log in, there'll be a little link that says demo or upcoming UI. And don't be disappointed when you do so, because not all the screens are done yet. But the screens that are done, it means the middleware is complete, the API call is complete, and you now have the pretty middleware. We're using Angular and charts. The parts of the screen that use charts are using C3. One of the things you'll notice if you are in test driving the middleware is it's a lot quicker and it's a lot snappier. And it's not just because of the asynchronous, but also how the pages are being rendered. So right now we're using AOT, and the old method was JIT, which is much smaller, much slower. So you'll find that once it's complete, it's going to be a much snappier UI. Right now, all of the API calls are using WebSockets, but we're also going to provide a REST API, just like the old middleware did. And right now, it's very much a work in progress. Probably about 40% of the screens in the middleware are complete. For our next beta in October, we expect to have even more, and we expect UI parity by 11.2. And that's just phase one. So right now, anyone who's used FreeNAS before, you either love the UI or you hate it. The layout is not very workflow related. So once we're finished doing all the underlying stuff, then we can start looking at, okay, these are what the screens used to look like. Let's go in and do a more logical workflow. So we're going to start shuffling where things are. But for 11.1 and 11.2, it's going to be the same layout as the existing one, just with the new technology. Having said that, it is a little prettier. This is not the default theme. We do have a bunch of themes in the upper right-hand corner. I chose the FreeNAS Sharks theme, which is a darker theme. But we also have lighter themes for people who are colorblind. The UI itself is fully accessible, so it works with screen readers. And it's also going to be useful to use on mobile devices. So those are the goals that we have within the UI. But I chose this one because we had some pretty charts. but that is one of several themes. By the time 11.2 is done, we're also going to have full video tutorials and documentation on how to make your own themes, so that's something that you can do as well. So a sneak peek at the theme. So that's sort of the eye candy stuff. There's also some pieces that are very useful, especially when you're serving data. So we've had the alert mechanism for ages. It'll happily send you an email, and it'll do the nice little red flashy thing in your browser. One of the things we added in 11.0 is the ability to send alerts to a whole bunch of external services. And right in the system, we have a new thing called alert services. I have a screenshot here. Basically, you select the name of your alert service, and once you've selected the service, the information you need to connect to that service, the fields will change, so you can input your connection info, and it will automatically send your alerts there. So a lot of people these days spend their time on Slack. PagerDuty is still very popular, HipChat, and we are happy to add other alert services. So if one you use is not there, please make a bug report for us, and we'll see if we can add it. We've also added a section to the services screen. So services, they always had the green light and the red light, so you can see what was on and off. What we've added is the start on boot. So it's very easy to tell at a glance if this system boots up, which services are going to automatically start. And it's just a matter of checking the boxes for the services that you want to do so. So it's something we've had a request for a long time. This is a new feature. So we've had jails and plugins for quite a few years now. And jails and plugins are good if the software that you want to run is available on FreeBSD, because it's basically a FreeBSD mechanism. What we're integrating in now, so we introduced it in 11.0, and we have improvements coming for 11.1, is integration with Beehive. And if you haven't heard of Beehive before, this is FreeBSD's hypervisor. So it's built into the kernel. It is very fast for hypervisor, but it does work differently than jails and plugins. So you do want to make sure that your system has enough CPU and RAM to be able to devote some of that to VM space. You can see from the supported guests that pretty much most any guest you want to install is supported, and it's fairly easy to install any of those. The version that comes in 11.0 makes it fairly easy to install. What we're doing is we're adding improvements for configuring those guests. So right now, there's just a new section right next to jails called VMs. You give it a name, you state how you want to access it, and you spin up the VM. The other major feature that went into 11.0 is we're starting to make it easier to integrate with cloud services. So we have had an S3 CMD plugin for a while, but now we install MinIO with the base operating system, and it makes it very easy to integrate with the Amazon S3 cloud. And over time, we're going to add other cloud providers as well. And basically, it's just a matter of setting up an IP address and a port, giving your Amazon key information, and you can now be backing storage for the stuff that you have in your Amazon cloud. So those were the major features of 11.0. What we're working on for 11.1, quite a few improvements, and if you're an OpenCFS geek like I am, there's a lot of exciting OpenCFS features, and there's a lot of stuff that makes storage much nicer. So we did pull in the latest version of OpenCFS, And there have been, they've been doing some major revamps of the algorithm, and they're finding that you're getting much faster performance with the file system itself. One of the biggest performance things, if you have ever had a large number of snapshots and decided to delete them at once, that was something that would be excruciatingly slow. There have been major improvements on that. So deleting a large number of snapshots is much quicker, and replicating itself is also much quicker. So OpenZFS has put a lot of work into improving those. One of the features that people have been asking for forever is the ability to pause or resume a scrub. So if you're scrubbing a terabyte worth of data and you need to reboot the system, and guess what? You're starting from disk block 1 when you boot back up. That's no longer a thing. You can actually pause it and then resume from where you started, where you ended off. So people want that for a long time. We are syncing with the latest FreeBSD stable, so that means the ports tree is all caught up, all of the third-party applications. We have a lot of new drivers, and all the security vulnerabilities also are up to date. The next point is interesting. So mirrored swap is something that people have wanted for a while as well. Typically, swap isn't an issue unless a disk fails and an application was using that swap. That could bring the system to a halt. That won't happen now because we now automatically mirror swap partitions. So unless 2 disks go there on your swap, you should be fine. Those that are more familiar with Python, the middleware, we're now using async.io. I'm not a Python dev, but when I look that up, it apparently makes the code more readable, and it's much easier to write asynchronous code, which is what we're aiming for in the 11 series. Resilvering priority. Has anybody ever tried to resilver a large VDEV before? That is something that can, one, take a long amount of time, depending upon the size of your disks, and it can also bog down a busy system. So we've added in the UI the ability to say during work hours, resilver in the background, but during non-use hours, bump up the priority so that resilvering gets done. And we've added that right into the UI. So you can actually pick the hours when to bump up the resilver priority and what days to do so. I mentioned before that the VMs renew, and the guy who's been working on our VMs has done about 4 months worth of improvements to them. A lot of the stuff that didn't go into the initial integration with FreeNAS dealt with MAC addresses and your NIC configurations, so we've had a lot of improvements over that. Anybody who's tried the 11 version, if you go into VNC to access your VM, you're stuck at a default resolution. You can now change the resolution. We now support authentication. If you're doing block devices, you can set your sector size. We have VM cloning. And there's more stuff he's still trying to get in for 11.1 release. So if you've just tried the VM support, definitely give it a go again in 11.1. You'll find it's a much nicer experience. We also have a bunch of miscellaneous improvements. So we did add some more DDNS providers. A lot of people use mirrored boot pools, and we're disappointed that they weren't able to detach a device. So we added that ability. You can also use TOP to see your ARC stats compressed. And there's more stuff that we're scrambling to see if we can get in for 11.1. I'll leave this up. I have a bunch of resources there. We'll take some questions, and then I'll put the last slide up, which has URL to this slide. And we have 10 minutes for questions, if anybody has questions. Yes?
If you have an old server set up with RAID configuration, what happens when you upgrade to the new version of the ZFS?
So the recommendation is you really don't want to use your RAID hardware. You want it to be in JBOD mode. So that's what you want to do. Yeah. Then copy your data over. Yes?
So your VM solution that you're doing on this,
Yes.
is this kind of trying to mirror like the general large amount of capabilities that KVM does currently for Linux is doing in the BSD equivalent, more or less?
So Beehive is a little bit different. So you may or may not be able to use the VM solution. So a lot of VM solutions, they don't require you to use certain CPUs, and they have to emulate certain calls in the software. Beehive took a different approach where you have to use a certain set of CPUs to get the calls, but everything is happening through the hardware calls. So it's faster in that it doesn't have to do any software emulation, but it does limit you to which CPUs you can use.
So you don't have anything that kind of that's like, if you will, middleware to fill in for, I've got this set of handlings or whatever, but I don't have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You don't fill in the blanks. You're like, well, that's not there, so you don't get it.
Right.
You've got this instead, and you can have that, but not this.
Yeah. And what you'll find is the hardware that works with Beehive is the same hardware that we recommend for storage because it's good CPU.
Which vendor CPUs are you talking about? You're talking about AMD, you're talking about Intel?
Yeah, so most of the Intel stuff works. AMD's, we have a list of which ones do and don't work. And in our documentation, if you go to the VM chapter, it gives you the command where you can actually test your CPU to see if it has the required extensions, and also the list of ones that we know work. Yes?
What are some of the use cases for running VM storage server?
Yeah, that's what we used to think when we started creating storage, and you would be surprised the amount of people that want to do that. So it's a very, very big use case. Yes?
One trend as far as when people are running VMs on storage is to virtualize the storage so that they don't have to micromanage each disk as they're adding storage to their virtual environments. Otherwise, the headache of having to provision each piece of storage as they add new disk will kill a lot of big environments. By big environments, I mean 150 VMs and up.
Any other questions? Yes?
So you mentioned you've got a lot more drivers in this now. How much bigger has your HCL has actually got, just from what it's been? Like, for example, I've got a problem where, I do a lot of Linux-based storage solutions now, and I can basically just stick anything I want, throw it in there, and it generally works in the less. Like, throw in a package, might do this, might do that. The big thing I've been noticing now, my last attempt at FreeNAS, which was probably 6-8 months ago, give or take, was that, I'm using flash controllers turned into LSI 9211AIs. Dell's PERC H310 is the same thing, half the cost. But I've noticed that if I'm not running a certain version of the firmware, BSD will just throw a fit, and it will give me problems with the card, or it just won't work with the card. Are the drivers getting better to where they're accepting a wider range of firmware now? And are there any, like network stack drivers, we're using any kind of compatibility layer to get those working to get them in the HCL, or is everything you're supporting still completely native to the support?
Yeah, so LSI is interesting. So we used to actually, in the alert mechanism, tell you if you weren't at the latest driver, which was easier when the driver names matched the actual version. And then the numbers started getting weird. So we actually removed the alert because it was just confusing people. So now our recommendation is for your adapter, go to the website and make sure you're at the latest firmware, and then you should be happy. And it's always hard directing people where to go, because finding it on the website is sometimes an exercise in itself, and there's just so many adapters out there.
And they buy and sell companies.
Exactly.
if you run
They've changed their
Broadcom,
name 3 times in the last year, so,
Yeah, Broadcom did, and LSI is like one of the second worst ones.
yeah,
But they're a standard controller everybody's got.
yeah. So our recommendation is go to the vendor website, make sure you're at the latest, and then you should be good. When it comes to network drivers and that, sometimes if you're on the bleeding edge, we actually, one of our developers does the networking drivers for FreeBSD. So if you have a chipset that's not supported yet, make a bug ticket that has a debug so he can look at the debug symbols, and he'll see about upstreaming it to FreeBSD and getting it back down to us. So we've had good luck with that. Got any other questions? Yep.
Is it easy to take advantage of some fast disk, slow disks, so you can have some big SATA drives and then maybe an SSD in the same tool? Or do you have to figure out a way to prioritize that?
Yeah, so that's not my area of expertise, but I know in both our support department and our sales department, they actually sell and support systems that do that. So certainly, if you drop by our booth, we can get someone to contact you if you want more details on that, on the
The
technical
IX
side.
systems does that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks everyone.